Detective Marcus Ellis, a wealthy black CEO dedicated to uplifting Riverside City, faces blatant racial prejudice and systemic corruption. Despite his modest lifestyle, influential figures like Officer Daniels and Henry Caldwell conspire to frame him for fraud and money laundering, using both subtle microaggressions and overt discrimination. At a community fundraiser, Marcus is publicly humiliated and unjustly arrested, revealing the deep-seated biases within law enforcement and elite circles supported by allies Ava and Rachel. Marcus battles against the oppressive forces determined to undermine his efforts, highlighting the pervasive racism and power abuse he must confront to achieve justice for his community. Detective Marcus Ellis glanced down at his wrist, adjusting the simple leather band that contrasted sharply with the ostentatious watches of his office. His hand moved with practiced ease as he poured another cup of coffee, the rich aroma filling the modest kitchen of his downtown apartment. Despite being the CEO of Ellis Innovations, a leading tech firm, Marcus lived in a small, unassuming space above a local bookstore, preferring the simplicity of home-cooked meals over the high-end dining his status could afford. The sun had just begun its descent, casting a warm golden hue through the curtained window, illuminating the room with a gentle glow. Marcus moved to the small dining table, where a stack of community volunteer flyers awaited his attention. Tonight was the annual fundraiser for the Neighborhood Youth Center, an event he had supported since its inception. His commitment to giving back was well known, yet often overshadowed by the wealth and power his position bestowed upon him. As he reviewed the evening's schedule, his phone buzzed on the counter. A message from his assistant popped up. "Meeting at 7 confirmed." Marcus sighed, glancing at the clock. Time slipped away faster these days, with board meetings and investor calls interspersed with his community engagements. He valued every moment, striving to bridge the gap between his corporate responsibilities and his desire to effect tangible change locally. Marcus walked to the window. Gazing out at the bustling streets below Riverside City was a place of stark contrasts. Gleaming skyscrapers stood side by side with dilapidated tenements, each block telling a story of prosperity and struggle. The evening air carried the distant sounds of traffic, mingling with the hum of city life. Yet beneath the surface, tensions simmered. Systemic challenges and deep-seated prejudices continued to test the resilience of the community he cherished. Tonight, however, he was here not as a CEO, but as one of their own, a neighbor, a friend, a supporter. He donned his favorite worn-in denim jacket, a stark departure from the tailored suits he usually wore. The jacket bore little to no branding, a testament to his preference for authenticity over status symbols. As he slipped on his shoes, he caught his reflection in the mirror. A man whose wealth was evident only to those who looked closely enough to see beyond the exterior. Stepping out, Marcus locked his door and took a deep breath, the cool evening air invigorating his senses. He walked down the narrow hallway of his building, greeting the doorman with a warm smile that belied the stern demeanor his professional life often required. The lobby was a blend of vintage charm and modern functionality, a microcosm of the city's own dual nature. As he made his way to the community center, Marcus felt the familiar hum of anticipation. Volunteers bustled about, setting up tables adorned with colorful decorations and arranging chairs in anticipation of guests. The scent of freshly baked goods wafted through the air, mingling with the faint strains of jazz music playing softly in the background. Marcus loved these events. The sense of unity, the collective effort to make a difference. He approached the entrance, where a group of teenagers were huddled, laughing and sharing stories. Their carefree demeanor contrasted with the weight of the issues Marcus often grappled with in his work. He caught snippets of their conversation, the universal language of youth bridging the gaps that sometimes seemed insurmountable. "Hey Marcus," called out a young man with a bright smile, nudging his friend playfully. "Glad you could make it tonight." "Of course," Marcus replied, his voice warm and genuine. "Wouldn't miss it for the world." He exchanged pleasantries with the group, listening attentively as they discussed their plans for the evening. It was moments like these that grounded him, reminding him why he strived to use his position for good. But beneath the surface of camaraderie, Marcus sensed the undercurrents of discontent that the community faced daily. As he entered the main hall, the room buzzed with conversations and laughter. Tables were lined with donations and auction items, each one representing hours of volunteer work and heartfelt generosity. Marcus moved through the crowd with ease, his presence a beacon of support rather than an assertion of dominance. He was known here as someone who listened, who cared deeply about the people he served. At the back of the room, Marcus spotted his old friend, Ava Thompson, a grassroots organizer with a fierce dedication to social justice. Ava was a pillar of the community, her tireless efforts to address systemic inequities earning her both respect and animosity from different quarters. They hadn't seen each other in years, not since their paths diverged. She pursued activism full-time, while he focused on corporate innovation with a philanthropic edge. "Ava," Marcus greeted, approaching her with a friendly nod. "Amanda," Ava corrected, a playful glint in her eye. "Always the CEO here, huh?" Marcus chuckled, shaking her hand firmly. "You know me, always trying to balance it all." They stood for a moment, the shared history between them, a silent acknowledgement of the bond they once had, and the divergence of their journeys. Ava was in her early 30s, her curly hair pulled back into a functional ponytail, her attire practical and unassuming, despite the event's celebratory nature. "How have you been?" Ava asked, her tone softening as she sensed his underlying fatigue. "Busy as always, but moments like these make it all worthwhile," Marcus replied, gesturing around the room. Ava nodded thoughtfully. "It's not easy fighting against the tide, Marcus, but we keep pushing because the stakes are too high to sit back." He agreed, understanding all too well the challenges she faced. The systemic barriers, the resistance from those in power, the endless battles for equality. These were battles he fought in different arenas. Yet, the frustrations and triumphs they both experienced were intrinsically linked. Just then, a commotion near the entrance drew their attention. A man in a sharp suit, easily distinguishable from the more casual attire of the other guests, was engaged in a heated conversation with a group of volunteers. Marcus recognized him immediately. Henry Caldwell, a prominent investor with a reputation for being both influential and inflexible. "Hey, Henry!" Marcus called out, approaching cautiously. "Everything all right?" Henry glanced over, his expression hardening slightly. "Just discussing some last-minute details. Thanks for checking in." Ava watched the interaction, her instincts tingling. Henry was known for his stringent control over his investments and a tendency to bulldoze through community projects without fully understanding their implications. His presence often signaled impending changes, not all of which were welcomed. Marcus sensed the tension emanating from Henry and decided to approach the situation diplomatically. "You know, Henry, if there's anything we can do to help, just let us know." Henry sighed, rubbing his temples. "Appreciate it, Marcus, but this is something that needs to be handled at the top level." Ava watched the exchange, her protective instincts on high alert. Henry's rigid demeanor was a stark contrast to Rachel Green's more progressive outlook, and the two women had a history of professional clashes that often left the community center's initiatives teetering on the edge of compromise. As Marcus sensed the unease, another figure emerged from the crowd. A young woman with striking red hair and a determined look in her eyes. She walked with purpose towards them, her presence commanding attention despite the casual setting. "Detective Ellis," she greeted, her tone polite yet firm. "I've heard a lot about you." Marcus nodded, slightly puzzled. "And you must be Rachel Green, CEO of Green Holdings?" "Yes," she confirmed, extending her hand. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you." Marcus shook her hand, noting the firmness of her grip. Rachel Green was a formidable figure in her own right, a self-made billionaire who had built her empire from the ground up. Unlike Marcus, whose wealth was inherited through a tech conglomerate, Rachel's success was a testament to relentless ambition and strategic acumen. Yet, like Marcus, she maintained a humble public persona, often seen volunteering at local shelters and mentoring young entrepreneurs. "It's been a long time, Rachel," Marcus remarked, attempting to break the ice. "How have you been?" "Thriving, thanks to our recent expansion," Rachel replied, her eyes briefly meeting Marcus's with a hint of something unreadable. "I wanted to discuss a potential collaboration for the youth center's tech initiative." Marcus felt a flicker of excitement at the prospect of merging their resources for a good cause. "That sounds promising. Let's find a quiet corner to talk." Ava watched the exchange, her protective instincts noticing the underlying tension between Rachel and Henry. Both women were titans in their fields, and their interactions often carried an unspoken competitive edge. "Rachel," Marcus began, settling into the chair opposite her. "Tell me more about this tech initiative." Rachel leaned forward, her demeanor professional yet passionate. "We're developing a mentorship platform that connects youth with industry professionals. The goal is to provide guidance and resources that can help them navigate their career paths, much like how I was supported when I started out." Marcus nodded, impressed by her vision. "That's a fantastic idea. Combining our efforts could amplify the impact significantly." Rachel smiled, a genuine warmth in her eyes. "I thought you'd say that your work with the community center has been exemplary. Together, we could bridge the gap between technology and education in a meaningful way." As they delved into the details, discussing funding, implementation strategies, and community engagement, Ava returned, joining their conversation. The synergy between Marcus and Rachel was evident, their shared commitment to the cause fostering a sense of collaboration that felt both natural and necessary. However, as the evening progressed, the undercurrents of unresolved tensions began to surface. Henry Caldwell approached the table, his presence disrupting the harmonious discussion. "Rachel, Marcus," he greeted, his tone neutral, but his eyes sharp. "I couldn't help but overhear your plans. It sounds ambitious." Rachel maintained her composure, meeting his gaze confidently. "We believe it's the right direction, Henry. Empowering the youth is crucial for the future." Henry nodded slowly, his expression inscrutable. "I agree. But let's ensure that the funding is allocated responsibly. We can't afford any missteps." Marcus sensed the thinly veiled criticism in Henry's words, a reminder of the challenges they would face in balancing corporate interests with genuine community needs. He exchanged a brief glance with Rachel, both understanding the delicate dance they were engaged in, balancing ambition with integrity. As the night wore on, the fundraiser continued, conversations flowing seamlessly between lighthearted banter and serious discussions. Marcus moved through the crowd, engaging with volunteers and attendees, his presence a calming force amidst the evening's energy. Yet, the seeds of conflict had been planted, and the looming challenges hinted at a storm yet to come. Back at his apartment, Marcus sat alone at the dining table, the day's events replaying in his mind. His phone buzzed again, this time with a message from Ava. "Something doesn't feel right about tonight. Keep your eyes open." Marcus frowned, the weight of her words pressing on him. He knew Ava's intuition was rarely wrong, and if she felt a disturbance beneath the surface, he needed to heed her warning. He took a deep breath, the evening air still lingering in his senses, and made a silent promise to remain vigilant. The night was young, and the shadows of influence stretched long across Riverside City, hinting at secrets waiting to be unearthed. The evening air was thick with anticipation as the fundraiser progressed, the room buzzing with conversations about potential collaborations and community initiatives. Marcus moved gracefully through the crowd, his presence both commanding and approachable. He engaged with volunteers, listened attentively to parents sharing their hopes for their children's futures, and exchanged ideas with other community leaders. Despite his busy schedule, he remained fully present, embodying the very essence of the community's spirit. As the night wore on, the initial harmony began to show signs of strain. Near the refreshment table, a group of older men in tailored suits congregated, their gazes intermittently fixed on Marcus. One of them, a burly man with a stern expression named Officer Thompson, stepped forward, his demeanor exuding authority and subtle disdain. "Mr. Ellis," Officer Thompson began, his tone clipped, "I hear you've been making quite the impact around here." Marcus turned, meeting the officer's gaze with a calm professionalism. "Thank you, Officer Thompson. I'm just trying to give back where I can." Officer Thompson's eyes narrowed slightly, his lips pressing into a thin line. "It's good to see successful individuals like yourself taking an interest in community affairs. We could use more people willing to help, especially in these challenging times." Marcus sensed the underlying tension in the officer's words, a mix of condescension and veiled skepticism. "Absolutely, every bit helps." Before the conversation could progress, another man approached, a young police officer named Daniels, fresh-faced and eager. He extended his hand, albeit hesitantly. "Mr. Ellis, I'm Officer Daniels. It's an honor to meet you." Marcus shook his hand warmly, masking the slight discomfort he felt. "Likewise, Officer Daniels." How can I assist you tonight? Officer Daniels glanced around nervously, before leaning in slightly. Actually, I wanted to discuss some community policing initiatives. Your insights could be invaluable. Marcus appreciated the officer's directness, but couldn't shake the feeling that there was more beneath the surface. I'd be happy to help. Let's find a quiet spot to talk. As they moved towards a less crowded corner of the room, Officer Thompson watched them with a knowing glance before turning back to his group. The subtle dynamics of power and prejudice were palpable, even in such a seemingly benign setting. Once seated, Officer Daniels began outlining his ideas for improving relations between the police force and the community. Marcus listened attentively, nodding thoughtfully. However, the conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Henry Caldwell, who strode purposefully towards them, his presence demanding immediate attention. "Good evening, gentlemen," Henry greeted, his tone formal and slightly patronizing. "I trust the discussions are fruitful." Marcus maintained his composure, greeting Henry with a firm handshake. "Always a pleasure, Mr. Caldwell. We're just discussing some community initiatives." Henry's gaze flickered between Marcus and Officer Daniels, a subtle smirk playing on his lips. Indeed, it's commendable to see such dedication, although I must say, it's rare to find someone of your background taking such an active role. Marcus felt a flush rise to his cheeks, a mixture of irritation and hurt bubbling beneath his calm exterior. He chose his words carefully, addressing the implied remark with poised dignity. "I'm proud to be part of this community, Mr. Caldwell. Diversity strengthens us all." Henry chuckled softly, the sound devoid of genuine amusement. "Absolutely, diversity is key, but it's essential to ensure that everyone understands their place. After all, maintaining order is paramount." The room seemed to grow colder, the weight of Henry's words hanging heavily in the air. Marcus's internal struggle intensified, balancing his desire to remain composed with the simmering frustration at the subtle discrimination he faced. He met Henry's gaze steadily, refusing to let the insult penetrate his professional facade. "Order is indeed important," Marcus replied evenly, "but so is inclusion, and ensuring that every member feels valued and respected." Henry's smirk faltered slightly, replaced by a look of mild annoyance. Of course, just ensuring that efforts are well directed." Before Marcus could respond, Rachel Green approached, her presence radiating confidence and warmth. "Henry, always a pleasure, Marcus. Ava, it's great to see you all here." Rachel's genuine smile contrasted sharply with Henry's insincerity, providing a brief respite from the mounting tension. "I wanted to discuss the potential collaboration we mentioned earlier. Combining our resources could significantly impact the youth center's tech initiative." Marcus nodded, grateful for Rachel's supportive demeanor. "Absolutely. Let's set up a meeting to go over the details." As Rachel engaged with Officer Thompson and other community members, Marcus excused himself from the uncomfortable encounter with Henry. He found Ava Thompson standing near the entrance, her expression mirroring his own sense of unease. "Ava," Marcus greeted, his voice low. "Is everything all right?" Ava approached, her eyes briefly scanning the room before settling on Marcus. "Not entirely. Henry Caldwell has been making some questionable comments tonight. It's creating unnecessary friction." Marcus's jaw tightened, the frustration evident in his subtle clenching of fists. "I noticed it's disheartening to see such attitudes persist, even in community settings." Ava placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "You're handling it well. Stay focused on what matters, our mission to uplift the community." Marcus appreciated her support, though he couldn't ignore the lingering sting of Henry's remarks. "Thank you, Ava. It means a lot." They stood together for a moment, the shared understanding between them a silent bond. As the night progressed, the initial harmony began to fracture further. Henry Caldwell, unwilling to let the evening pass without asserting his dominance, approached Marcus again, this time with a more overtly hostile demeanor. "Marcus," Henry called out, his tone sharper, "I couldn't help but overhear your conversation with Officer Daniels. While it's admirable to seek input, I hope you're not overstepping your boundaries in trying to influence police procedures." Marcus took a deep breath, maintaining his calm despite the rising anger. "I'm merely offering support, Henry. There's no overstepping here." Henry's eyes narrowed, the mask of politeness slipping to reveal a hint of resentment. "Just ensure that your contributions align with our protocols. We wouldn't want any missteps that could jeopardize the community's safety. Marcus felt a surge of irritation, but he held his tongue, choosing to rise above the provocation. Understood, safety is a priority we all share. With a curt nod, Henry turned away, leaving Marcus standing amidst the growing tension. Ava stepped forward, her presence a calming influence. Don't let him get to you, Marcus. Focus on the positive impact we're making. Marcus nodded, though the encounter left a lingering bitterness. As the night drew to a close, he reflected on the evening's events, the subtle and overt prejudices he faced from influential figures like Henry Caldwell underscored the systemic challenges that plagued Riverside City. Despite his wealth and power, he was not immune to the biases that persisted, a reminder of the work that still needed to be done. Later that evening, as Marcus reviewed the day's notes and upcoming plans, his phone buzzed with a new message. It was from Rachel Green. Great meeting tonight. Let's touch base tomorrow about the tech initiative. A small smile crept onto his face, the promise of meaningful collaboration reigniting his passion. He typed a quick reply, affirming the meeting, before leaning back in his chair. The fight against prejudice and systemic injustice was far from over, but with allies like Ava and Rachel, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. However, as he reached for his coffee, the tranquility of his evening was shattered by the sharp ring of his phone. The screen flashed an unfamiliar number and an unknown number label. He hesitated for a moment before answering, curiosity overcoming caution. "Ellis," he greeted, his voice steady. "Detective Ellis, this is Officer Daniels." The voice on the other end was urgent, tinged with worry. "We have a situation downtown, multiple disturbances reported near the old textile factory. We need your expertise on this." Marcus's heart sank, knowing the area all too well. The old factory had long been a hotspot for illegal activities, a place where the city's underbelly thrived away from prying eyes. "I'm on my way," he responded, grabbing his coat and preparing to leave. As he stepped out into the cool night air, Ava met him at the door, concern etched on her face. "Is everything okay?" "Just another call," Marcus replied, trying to mask his apprehension. "I'll handle it." Ava nodded, understanding the weight of his responsibilities. "Be careful, Marcus. Let me know if you need anything." He offered a reassuring smile before heading to his car, the night's earlier tensions amplifying his sense of unease. The drive to the textile factory was tense, the streets eerily quiet under the blanket of darkness. As he approached the dilapidated structure, flashing lights illuminated the area, casting long, menacing shadows against the broken windows and crumbling facade. Marcus exited his car, the cool air biting at his skin as he approached Officer Daniels and the other responding officers. The scene was chaotic. Shouts echoed through the air, and the scent of smoke lingered ominously. Figures moved swiftly within the factory's confines, their actions aggressive and unrestrained. "What's the situation?" Marcus demanded, surveying the chaos. Officer Daniels gestured towards the entrance. "Multiple reports of armed groups causing havoc, suspected involvement in the recent surge of illicit trades we've been tracking." Marcus's mind raced, piecing together the information he had gathered over the past weeks. The textile factory had always been a breeding ground for organized crime, a nexus point for various illegal enterprises. Tonight, it seemed, the tensions within the criminal underworld were boiling over, threatening to spill into the streets. "Any information on who might be behind this?" Marcus asked, his voice firm. "We have intelligence pointing towards a faction led by a man named Malik Johnson," Daniels replied. "He's been linked to several high-profile crimes, including the recent sabotage at local businesses." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. Malik Johnson was a name he knew all too well. An elusive criminal mastermind whose operations had remained largely unchallenged, thanks in part to his deep connections within the city's elite. Johnson's influence extended far beyond the criminal underworld, infiltrating legitimate businesses and corrupting officials to shield his illicit activities. "All right," Marcus said, steeling himself for what was to come. "Let's move in. Maintain a perimeter and keep me updated on any developments." As the team advanced towards the factory, Marcus couldn't help but feel the weight of his dual roles pressing down on him. Here he was, a wealthy and powerful man, striving to uplift his community, now thrust into the heart of a conflict that threatened to undermine everything he stood for. the systemic challenges and prejudices he faced in his everyday life were now mirrored in the very environment he was trying to protect. Inside the factory, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Groups of men clashed, their movements frantic and desperate. Marcus's training kicked in, guiding his every action as he navigated the chaotic scene. He called out commands, his voice cutting through the noise, asserting his authority despite the overwhelming odds. As he pushed deeper into the factory, the sounds of violence grew louder, the stench of smoke and sweat filling his nostrils. He spotted Malik Johnson near the center of the chaos, orchestrating the mayhem with a ruthless efficiency that left no room for negotiation. "Johnson!" Marcus shouted, his voice echoing through the cavernous space. "It's over! Stand down now!" Johnson turned, a smirk playing on his lips as he faced Marcus. Well, if it isn't the great Marcus Ellis! To what do I owe the pleasure?" Marcus's jaw tightened, his anger bubbling beneath his composed exterior. "Your reign of terror ends tonight, Malik. Surrender, and we can talk about leniency." Johnson laughed, the sound cold and devoid of any genuine mirth. "Leniency from you, please, detective. You're nothing but a puppet, playing both sides to maintain your precious image." The insult stung, the layers of prejudice and power dynamics intertwining in a way that Marcus had hoped to avoid, but now found himself entrenched in. He took a step forward, maintaining eye contact despite the venom in Johnson's words. "I'm here to put an end to your schemes. Your manipulation of this city stops now." Johnson's expression darkened, his eyes narrowing as he assessed Marcus. "You think you can challenge me? You're just a rich guy playing at being a detective. This city's corrupt, Ellis. You can't change that." Marcus felt a surge of frustration, the relentless discrimination and skepticism he faced mirrored in Johnson's contemptuous remarks. Yet, he remained steadfast, channeling his anger into unwavering determination. "I won't let your corruption continue. For the sake of Riverside City and everyone in it, I will stop you." Before the confrontation could escalate further, the sound of sirens and additional officers filled the space. The increased presence overwhelming the remaining chaos, Johnson glanced around, realizing the futility of his position as more law enforcement personnel closed in. "Fine," he spat, raising his hands in a mock gesture of surrender. "You win this round, Ellis, but the game isn't over." Marcus stepped forward, keeping his voice steady. "It is when we dismantle your operations completely." As Johnson was apprehended and the remaining disturbances quelled, Marcus felt a temporary sense of relief. However, the encounter had deepened his understanding of the systemic prejudices and corruption that pervaded every layer of Riverside City. Despite his wealth and influence, he was not immune to the biases that threatened to undermine his efforts, a reality that weighed heavily on him as he watched Johnson being led away in handcuffs. Returning to the community center, Marcus was greeted with a mix of gratitude and concern from his colleagues and volunteers. Ava approached him, her expression sympathetic yet resolute. "You handled that well, Marcus, but don't let their words get to you." He managed a weary smile, nodding appreciatively. "Thanks, Ava. It's a constant battle, but we have to keep pushing forward." As he recounted the night's events to the team, the underlying tensions and prejudices that he faced in his role as a community leader became increasingly apparent. Despite his best efforts to bridge gaps and foster unity, there were those who still sought to undermine his authority and question his motives based on his race and the disparities between his wealth and his humble lifestyle. Later that night, as Marcus sat alone in his modest apartment, the day's events replaying in his mind, he felt a heavy sense of frustration and helplessness. The systemic challenges he battled were not easily overcome, and the prejudices he encountered threatened to erode the progress he had worked so hard to achieve. Yet, amidst the turmoil, he found solace in the small victories: the gratitude from the community, the support from allies like Ava and Rachel, and the unwavering determination that kept him moving forward. He reached for his journal, a habit he had maintained since childhood, using it as a sanctuary for his thoughts and reflections. As he began to write, the words flowed effortlessly, capturing the complexities of his experiences and the resilience that defined him. Today was another reminder of the work that lies ahead. Despite the progress we've made, the shadows of prejudice and corruption still loom large. But every step we take, every life we touch, brings us closer to a more just and equitable future. I won't let the darkness prevail. Riverside City deserves better, and I will continue to fight for it." Closing his journal, Marcus took a deep breath, the weight of his responsibilities pressing down on him, but also fueling his resolve. He glanced at the simple leather band on his wrist, a symbol of his humility and strength, a reminder that true power lies not in wealth or status, but in the unwavering commitment to justice and community. As he prepared for bed, his thoughts lingered on the night's events and the battles yet to come. The journey was far from over, and the stakes had never been higher. But with each challenge, Marcus felt a renewed sense of purpose, knowing that his efforts could make a tangible difference in the lives of those who needed it most. The city outside his window was quiet, the tumult of the evening giving way to the calm of the night. Yet, beneath the surface, the complexities of Riverside City continued to weave their intricate tapestry, hinting at the conflicts and revelations that awaited Marcus Ellis in the days to come. The next morning dawned gray and overcast, the sun obscured by thick clouds that seemed to mirror the heaviness in Marcus Ellis's heart. He arrived at the community center early, the soft hum of city life barely penetrating the quiet of the early hours. Today was the official launch of the tech initiative he and Rachel Green had meticulously planned, a project aimed at bridging the digital divide and empowering the youth with essential skills for the future. As Marcus entered the bustling center, he was greeted by the sight of eager volunteers setting up stations, preparing workshops, and arranging the flow of the day's activities. The air was filled with a sense of purpose and anticipation, a stark contrast to the tension that had been building over the past weeks. Marcus took a deep breath, savoring the moment of calm before the storm. "Morning, Marcus," Ava Thompson called out, her voice bright as she adjusted a banner that read, "Tech for Tomorrow." "Good morning, Ava," Marcus replied, offering her a reassuring smile. "Everything looks great." Rachel approached, her presence commanding yet warm. "Ready to make some magic happen today?" "Absolutely," Marcus responded, shaking her hand firmly. "We've put in a lot of work. Let's ensure it pays off." As the day unfolded, the community center buzzed with activity. Workshops on coding, digital literacy, and entrepreneurial skills filled the rooms, each session attended by enthusiastic youths eager to learn and grow. Marcus moved through the space with ease, engaging with participants, answering questions, and providing encouragement. The initiative was a beacon of hope, a testament to what could be achieved when resources and passion converged. However, beneath the surface of success, the shadows of systemic challenges lingered. Marcus had received an anonymous tip the night before, a warning that not everyone was pleased with his efforts. He had dismissed it initially, focusing instead on the positive impact he was making. But now, as the day progressed smoothly, the warning gnawed at him, a persistent reminder that his actions might be stirring forces he hadn't anticipated. As afternoon approached, Marcus noticed a group of men loitering near the entrance, their presence unsettling. They were impeccably dressed, exuding an air of authority and intimidation that made Marcus uneasy. Among them was Officer Daniels, whose previously hesitant demeanor had shifted to one of assertive dominance. The other men followed suit, their eyes fixed on Marcus with thinly veiled contempt. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine, recognizing the signs of impending conflict. He approached Ava, who was overseeing a coding workshop, and whispered, "We need to keep an eye on those guys. They've been giving me a hard time lately." Ava nodded, her expression serious. "I've noticed. Let's stay vigilant." As the day wore on, the tension escalated. The group's presence became more intrusive, their comments laced with thinly disguised hostility. During a break, one of the men stepped forward, blocking Marcus's path. "Mr. Ellis," he began, his voice dripping with sarcasm, "impressive turnout you've got here. Must be nice to have all this wealth to throw around." Marcus kept his composure, his eyes steady as he replied, "We're here to make a difference. Everyone deserves access to these opportunities." The man smirked, glancing at Officer Daniels for support. "Difference? Sure. But let's not forget who's really in charge around here. People like us have been keeping things running smoothly for years. Your little projects are a nice touch, but they won't change the bigger picture." Marcus felt the familiar surge of frustration, but held his tongue. Instead, he offered a measured response. "Change doesn't come from maintaining the status quo. It comes from innovation and collaboration. We're all on the same side here." The man's smile faded, replaced by a look of irritation. Same side. That's a nice sentiment, but actions speak louder than words. Just make sure your actions don't interfere with how things are done. Before Marcus could retort, Officer Daniels stepped forward, his presence now a clear challenge. Let's keep this professional, Marcus. We're all here to support the community. Ava intervened, placing herself between Marcus and the group. There's no need for hostility. We're all working towards the same goal. But the underlying tension was palpable, a reminder of the systemic biases and power dynamics that Marcus continuously navigated. The men exchanged glances, the air thick with unspoken threats, before retreating back to their group. Ava gave Marcus a reassuring nod, but the uneasy feeling lingered. As the evening approached, the community center began to wind down, the day's successes celebrated with smiles and handshakes. Marcus felt a sense of accomplishment, knowing that despite the obstacles, they had made significant progress. He was just about to leave when a commotion erupted near the exit. "Stop him!" one of the men shouted, his voice cutting through the hum of conversations. Marcus turned to see the group advancing towards him, their intentions unmistakably hostile. Officer Daniels was at the forefront, his expression hard and unforgiving. "Marcus Ellis," he called out, his tone icy. "You're coming with us." Before Marcus could react, two officers moved to restrain him, their hands gripping his arms firmly. The crowd around them fell silent, witnessing the sudden confrontation with a mix of confusion and fear. "What's going on?" Ava demanded, stepping forward defiantly. "Let him go!" "Officer Daniels, what is the meaning of this?" Rachel interjected, her voice steady but her eyes sharp with concern. Daniels turned his glare towards Rachel, his patience clearly wearing thin. "This is between Marcus and us, nothing for the public to see." Marcus struggled against the hold, his mind racing. "What's the problem, Daniels? I haven't done anything wrong." Daniels sneered, his grip tightening. "Don't play dumb, Marcus. You know exactly what you did. This community center is a front for your illicit activities. We've been watching you." Ava and Rachel exchanged stunned looks, the accusations completely unfounded, and yet the weight of Daniels' words hanging heavily in the air. "Illicit activities?" Ava echoed, her voice rising in disbelief. "That's absurd. We're here to help, not harm." Daniels laughed bitterly. "Oh, come on, don't act like you're innocent. Your tech initiatives are just a cover for money laundering and other shady dealings. We have evidence." Marcus felt a surge of anger and betrayal. These were baseless accusations, a clear attempt to discredit him and undermine his efforts. He knew that Daniels' rise within the department had been fueled by his own ambitions and willingness to bend the rules. "You're making a mistake, Daniels. This isn't true." "Don't tell me to stop," Daniels snapped, his face contorting with rage. "You and your friends think you're better than the rest of us, but you're just playing with fire." As the officers began to lead Marcus away, Ava stepped in front of them, her stance protective. "You have no right to do this. Marcus is a respected member of our community." Daniels shoved past her, his contemptuous gaze fixed on Marcus. "Respect doesn't mean immunity. We have a duty to uphold the law, even if it means taking down someone like you." Rachel moved closer, her voice firm. "This is ridiculous. You have no proof." "Let him go, Daniels." Daniels paused, his expression flickering with uncertainty before hardening again. "We'll see about that. The evidence will speak for itself." As Marcus was forced into the back of an unmarked van, the crowd dispersed quickly, the event overshadowed by the unfolding drama. Ava grabbed his arm, attempting to pull him back, but the officers were too strong, their intentions clear. Inside the van, the space was cramped and dimly lit, the air heavy with tension. Marcus took a deep breath, focusing on maintaining his composure despite the chaos surrounding him. "What evidence, Daniels?" "You know there's nothing here," he said, his voice steady but edged with frustration. Daniels glanced at him through the window of the van. "We have witnesses, surveillance footage, financial records, everything we need to take you down." Marcus knew the game. Daniels was leveraging any means necessary to tarnish his reputation and dismantle his initiatives. It was a blatant act of systemic prejudice, fueled by Daniels' personal vendetta against Marcus's success and influence. As the van pulled away from the community center, Marcus's mind raced. He needed to stay calm, to strategize his next move carefully. He couldn't let Daniels's accusations derail the progress he had worked so hard to achieve. The stakes were higher than ever, not just for him, but for the entire community relying on his efforts. Back at the community center, Ava and Rachel exchanged worried glances. "We need to find him," Ava said, determination hardening her features. "He didn't deserve this." Rachel nodded, her mind already moving into problem-solving mode. "I can reach out to some contacts. Maybe there's a way to intervene before things escalate further." Meanwhile, Officer Daniels was orchestrating the interrogation, his voice cold and unyielding. "Start talking, Ellis. We know you've been involved in illegal activities. Help us build a case against you." Marcus remained silent, refusing to be baited into admitting something he hadn't done. "You're wasting your time, Daniels. I have nothing to hide." Daniels leaned in closer, his tone menacing. "Don't underestimate us, Marcus. We have the resources and the connections to ensure that your downfall is swift and complete." As hours passed, Marcus felt the weight of the situation pressing down on him. He was isolated, facing false accusations from within the very system he sought to improve. The internal struggle between his anger and the need to remain composed was overwhelming, but he knew he couldn't afford to lose his cool. His mission was too important, and the community was counting on him to rise above the injustices he faced. Outside, Ava and Rachel were working tirelessly to gather evidence of Daniels's corruption. They reached out to trusted contacts, piecing together a network of allies who could help exonerate Marcus and expose the true nature of Daniels' actions. Time was of the essence, and the pressure was mounting as the truth seemed just out of reach. As night fell, the unmarked van returned to the community center, the doors opening to reveal a somber sight. Marcus was led out, his face a mask of calm determination despite the injustice he had endured. The crowd that had initially gathered erupted into a mix of shock and anger, rallying behind him. "Ava! Rachel!" Marcus called out, his voice echoing through the now quiet center. "We need to fight this." Before Ava could respond, a group of officers emerged from the shadows, their presence a stark reminder of the systemic barriers Marcus was up against. Officer Daniels stepped forward, his expression smug and triumphant. "Mr. Ellis, you're under arrest for fraud, money laundering, and obstruction of justice," he declared, the charges echoing off the walls of the community center. Marcus took a deep breath, his mind racing. "This isn't over, Daniels." "You know it's not." Daniels smirked, gesturing for Marcus to follow him. "We'll see about that. The truth will prevail." As Marcus was escorted away, the community center became a battleground of emotions. Rage, support, and disbelief intertwining in a chaotic dance. Ava and Rachel stood at the front, their determination unshaken despite the odds stacked against them. "We need to mobilize," Ava said, her voice resolute. "Marcus is innocent, and we need to prove it." Rachel nodded, her mind already formulating a plan. "I'll use my connections to get the media involved. Public opinion can be our strongest ally." The night was far from over, and the battle for justice was just beginning. Marcus, now a pawn in a larger game of power and prejudice, felt the urgency of the situation intensify. He knew that the path ahead would be fraught with challenges, but his resolve remained unbroken. The fight for truth and equity had reached a critical juncture, and the stakes had never been higher. As the community center emptied, Ava and Rachel prepared to launch their counteroffensive, the anticipation of what was to come hanging heavily in the air. The fight against systemic corruption and prejudice was no longer an abstract concept. It was personal, deeply intertwined with Marcus's own struggle for justice and recognition. Inside the interrogation room, Marcus sat alone, the door closed, and the room silent except for the ticking of the clock. He closed his eyes, drawing strength from his memories and the unwavering support of his community. The pivotal moment had arrived, and the true test of his resilience was about to unfold. The interrogation room was sterile, the harsh fluorescent lights casting stark shadows across Marcus Ellis's face. He sat alone, the cold metal chair pressing against his back, feeling the weight of the unjust accusations bearing down on him. Officer Daniels paced outside the door, his footsteps echoing ominously through the narrow hallway. Marcus took a deep breath, centering himself amidst the chaos he had faced adversity before. But this was different. The stakes were higher, the injustice more personal. As the door swung open, Daniels stepped inside, his expression hardened and unyielding. "Marcus Ellis," Daniels began, his voice devoid of any pretense. "We have substantial evidence against you: financial records, witness statements. Everything points to your involvement in money laundering and fraud." Marcus remained calm, meeting Daniels' gaze with unwavering resolve. "Those records are fabricated. I have nothing to hide." Daniels scoffed, pulling out a thick dossier from his briefcase and slamming it onto the table. "We've been monitoring your activities for months. The discrepancies between your public and private finances are too significant to ignore." Marcus glanced at the dossier, recognizing the manipulation in the numbers and the selective information presented. "You're twisting facts to fit your narrative. This is about power, Daniels. You want to discredit me because I'm trying to make a real difference in this community." Daniels leaned in, his eyes narrowing. "Don't play the hero card, Marcus. You're no different from the rest of them, using your position to exploit the very people you claim to help." Anger simmered beneath Marcus's composed exterior, but he restrained himself. "I've dedicated my life to uplifting Riverside City, not exploiting it. You're the one perpetuating corruption." Before Daniels could respond, the door burst open and Ava Thompson stormed in, her face flushed with determination. "Let him go, Daniels. This is a setup." Daniels turned sharply, his hand instinctively reaching for his sidearm. "Ava Thompson, what are you doing here?" Ava stood tall, her eyes blazing with defiance. "I'm here to ensure that justice prevails, not the twisted agendas of corrupt officers. Marcus is innocent." Daniels smirked, taking a step closer to Marcus. "Or so you claim. Maybe you should explain that to the evidence." Rachel Green entered the room behind Ava, her presence commanding immediate attention. "Enough, Daniels. This is harassment. Marcus has nothing to do with the allegations you're making." Daniels glared at Rachel, his patience clearly wearing thin. "We're simply doing our job, Ms. Green. If you have evidence to refute these claims, present it now." Rachel stepped forward, her voice steady and authoritative. "We have evidence that proves Daniels' involvement in orchestrating these false accusations to undermine Marcus's initiatives. You're not only accusing him without cause, but you're also violating his rights." Daniels' facade began to crack, the veneer of authority slipping as doubt flickered in his eyes. "That's a serious accusation, Rachel. Do you have proof?" Ava nodded, pulling out her phone and displaying a series of recorded conversations between Daniels and Henry Caldwell. "We have recordings of Daniels colluding with Caldwell to frame Marcus. This is a direct violation of multiple laws." Daniels's composure shattered completely. "You wouldn't dare. Those recordings are doctored." Rachel countered swiftly. "We have metadata and timestamps that prove the authenticity of these recordings. This isn't some fabricated scheme, Daniels. You need to explain yourself." Before Daniels could muster a response, another figure entered the room. A higher-ranking officer, Lieutenant Harris, known for his integrity and unwillingness to tolerate corruption. "What's going on here?" Harris demanded, his authoritative presence immediately shifting the room's dynamics. Ava quickly explained. "Lieutenant, Officer Daniels and Henry Caldwell have been colluding to frame Marcus Ellis for crimes he didn't commit. We have concrete evidence to support this." Harris's eyes darted between Daniels, Ava, and Rachel, his expression one of disbelief and concern. "Daniels, is this true?" Daniels stammered, trying to regain control. "Lieutenant, this is a misunderstanding. Marcus is involved in illegal activities, and we have the evidence to prove it." Harris raised a hand, silencing Daniels. "I've seen your file, Daniels, but the evidence you're presenting is circumstantial and lacks context. If there's more to this, I need to see it now." Ava stepped forward, her voice resolute. "We have recordings, financial records, and witness statements that directly link you and Caldwell to the framing of Marcus. If you don't come clean, we'll take this to the higher authorities." Daniels looked around the room, the realization of his precarious position dawning on him. The pressure was too much, and the evidence against him was overwhelming. With a defeated sigh, he slumped back in his chair. "Fine, I admit it, but you won't get away with this." Harris turned his attention to Marcus, who was still seated calmly despite the tumultuous events. "Mr. Ellis, based on the evidence presented, we have no grounds to continue this investigation against you. Officer Daniels will be placed under suspension, pending a full inquiry into his conduct. Marcus felt a surge of relief wash over him, the injustice beginning to unravel. "Thank you, Lieutenant. I appreciate your swift action." As Daniels was led out of the room, his plans thwarted, Marcus felt a renewed sense of determination. The conflict had peaked, exposing the systemic corruption that threatened to undermine the very fabric of Riverside City. Yet, in the face of adversity, Marcus's resolve had only strengthened, his commitment to justice unshaken. Back at the community center, Ava and Rachel were debriefing with Lieutenant Harris, ensuring that Daniels would face the consequences of his actions. "We need to make sure this doesn't happen to anyone else," Ava stated firmly. "This is just the tip of the iceberg." Rachel nodded in agreement. "We have to continue exposing the corruption within the system. This is just one example of how power can be abused." Lieutenant Harris placed a reassuring hand on Marcus's shoulder. "You've done the right thing, Marcus. We'll make sure that Daniels is held accountable, and we'll look into any further corruption that might exist within the department." As the team celebrated their hard-won victory, Marcus felt a sense of unity and purpose. The conflict had brought them closer, solidifying their resolve to fight against the injustices plaguing their community. But deep down, he knew that the battle was far from over. The systemic challenges they faced were deeply entrenched, and dismantling them would require relentless effort and unwavering determination. Later that night, as Marcus sat alone in his modest apartment, he reflected on the day's events. The unjust arrest, the prejudice, the ultimate triumph over corruption. It was a stark reminder of the work that still lay ahead. He reached for his journal, penning down his thoughts. Today was a victory, but it's only the beginning. There are more layers to uncover, more battles to fight. Riverside City deserves justice, and I won't stop until it's fully realized. The shadows of influence are deep, but together, we can illuminate the path to a brighter future. Just as he closed his journal, his phone buzzed with a new message. "We need to talk urgent. Meet me at the old textile factory. Ava." Marcus's heart raced as he read the message. The old textile factory had been a hotspot for illicit activities, a place where the city's underbelly thrived. Why would Ava want to meet him there now? He grabbed his coat, the urgency clear in Ava's message. As he stepped out into the cool night, the city lights casting long shadows on the pavement, he couldn't shake the feeling that something significant was about to unfold. Arriving at the factory's perimeter, Marcus scanned the area, the building looming ominously against the dark sky. Ava stood near the entrance, her face tense but resolute. "Marcus, we've got a problem," she said, urgency in her voice. "What is it?" Marcus asked, stepping closer. Ava pulled out her phone, displaying a live feed from a hidden camera. "We've intercepted communication between Henry Caldwell and another high-ranking officer. They're planning something big, something that could jeopardize everything we've worked for." Marcus's eyes narrowed as he watched the screen. The conversation hinted at a coordinated effort to undermine community initiatives and maintain the status quo through manipulation and intimidation. "What are they planning?" Ava took a deep breath. "They're orchestrating a smear campaign against our projects, using media influence to discredit us. If they succeed, it could ruin not just Marcus, but everyone involved in these initiatives." Marcus felt the weight of the situation pressing down on him. The stakes were higher than ever, and the urgency to act was palpable. "We need to expose them before they can execute their plans. Do you have a strategy in place?" Ava nodded, her determination unwavering. "I've been working with Rachel to gather more evidence. We need to hit them where it hurts. Public exposure and leveraging the media's reach." Marcus's mind raced, strategizing the next steps. "We should involve Lieutenant Harris. He can provide additional support and ensure that the evidence is handled properly." Ava agreed. "I'll contact him immediately. We can't afford any delays." As they prepared to leave, a sudden noise echoed through the factory grounds. A loud crash followed by hurried footsteps. Marcus and Ava turned towards the source, their hearts pounding. Figures emerged from the shadows, menacing and determined, their faces obscured by the darkness. "Looks like they know we're here," Ava whispered, her grip tightening on her phone. Marcus felt a surge of adrenaline, his internal strength kicking in despite the mounting pressure. "We need to stay calm and think this through. Running into them head-on won't solve anything." Before they could formulate a plan, one of the men stepped forward, his face partially illuminated by a flickering streetlight. "Ava Thompson, Marcus Ellis," he sneered. "Thought you could outsmart us, this ends now." Ava stood her ground, eyes locked with the intruders. "You won't get away with this, the truth will come out." The leader stepped closer, his voice cold and threatening. "We're here to ensure that our interests are protected. Don't try to interfere further, or there will be consequences." Marcus felt the tension reach its peak, the air thick with impending confrontation. He knew that this was the moment that would define their battle against systemic corruption. A pivotal turning point that could either cement their efforts or dismantle everything they had worked for. As the standoff intensified, Ava and Marcus exchanged a glance, a silent understanding passing between them. The time for hesitation was over. They needed to take decisive action to protect their community and expose the truth, no matter the cost. Before they could act, a piercing siren wailed in the distance, the sound growing louder with each passing second. The arrival of backup shifted the dynamics, offering a glimmer of hope amidst the escalating conflict. "Hold your ground!" Ava shouted, rallying the remaining members of their team. "Help is on the way!" Marcus nodded, his resolve solidifying. "We can do this together." As the backup officers arrived, the tide began to turn, the menacing figures retreating under the pressure of increased law enforcement presence. The conflict, though momentarily diffused, left an indelible mark on Marcus and Ava, underscoring the pervasive challenges they faced in their quest for justice. Breathing heavily, Ava looked at Marcus, her eyes filled with a mix of exhaustion and determination. "This is far from over. They won't stop, and neither can we." Marcus placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We'll keep pushing forward for the community, for justice." As they left the factory grounds, the night air felt heavy with the weight of their ongoing battle. The pivotal moment had arrived, and while they had survived this confrontation, the path ahead was fraught with uncertainty and danger. The stakes were higher than ever, and the anticipation of what was to come built an intense sense of urgency within them. Marcus glanced back at the darkened facade of the factory, knowing that this was only the beginning. The systemic corruption and prejudice they were fighting against were deeply entrenched, but with allies like Ava and Rachel and the support of the community, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. The impending confrontation with the forces that sought to undermine their efforts loomed large, setting the stage for the ultimate showdown that would determine the fate of Riverside City. The night was dark, the sky over Riverside City cloaked in heavy clouds that seemed to press down on the city's sprawl. Detective Marcus Ellis stood alone in the deserted lot adjacent to the old textile factory, the site of the day's earlier confrontation. The cold breeze tugged at his jacket as he awaited Ava and Rachel's arrival, the adrenaline from the day still coursing through his veins. The threat from Henry Caldwell and Officer Daniels had shaken him, but his resolve remained unbroken. Minutes later, Ava and Rachel emerged from the shadows, their expressions grim but determined. "We have what we need," Ava said, clutching her phone tightly. Rachel found more recordings of Daniel's meeting with Caldwell. "It's enough to take down the whole operation." Marcus nodded, feeling the weight of their mission pressing upon him. "Good. Let's move quickly before they realize we've uncovered everything." As they prepared to leave, a car engine roared to life, headlights cutting through the darkness as Henry Caldwell's sleek black sedan approached. Within moments, Officer Daniels and a group of men stepped out, their presence menacing and authoritative. "Marcus Ellis," Daniels called out, his voice echoing with venom. "Thought you could outsmart us. This ends tonight." Marcus squared his shoulders, stepping forward with Ava and Rachel flanking him. "This ends tonight, Daniels. Your corruption, your manipulation, it's all over. We have the evidence to expose you and Henry." Daniels laughed bitterly, the sound cold and hollow. "You think you can just waltz in here and ruin everything we've built? You're nothing but a pawn, Ellis." Rachel stepped forward, her eyes steely with determination. "Not anymore. We've got proof of your crimes, and the community will see through your facade." Ava held up her phone, displaying the incriminating recordings. "This is your confession, Daniels. You orchestrated the false accusations against Marcus, used your position to cover up your involvement in Henry's illegal schemes." Daniels's facade crumbled, his expression shifting from smug to desperate. You don't understand the bigger picture. Riverside City needs order. Without people like me, chaos would reign. Marcus felt a surge of frustration but kept his composure. Order doesn't mean oppression, Daniels. It means justice, fairness, and equality. You've twisted that into something unrecognizable. Daniels' eyes darted around, searching for an escape or backup. You think you can just expose us and solve all the problems. You have no idea what you're dealing with. Before Marcus could respond, Henry Caldwell stepped forward, his face contorted with rage. Marcus, you think you're so righteous, so above us, but you're just another obstacle in our way. We'll make sure you and your precious community suffer the consequences. A tense silence hung in the air as the two factions faced off. Marcus knew that Daniels and Henry were not to be underestimated, powerful, well-connected, and willing to do whatever it took to maintain their control over the city. But he also knew that they had now been exposed. Their plans revealed to the community they sought to manipulate. As the confrontation reached its peak, a group of community members who had been following the developments arrived, drawn by the tension and chaos. Among them was Mitchell Hayes, a hesitant but sympathetic figure who had previously expressed doubts about Daniels' integrity but lacked the courage to confront him. Mitchell stepped forward, holding a makeshift banner that read, "Justice for Riverside." "Stop this now," he called out, his voice wavering but resolute. "We support Marcus. We're with you." Daniels sneered, stepping closer to Marcus, who could feel the intense pressure of the moment. "You think a few supporters can change the tide? This is bigger than you or me." But Rachel and Ava stood firm beside Marcus, their support unwavering. "This isn't just about you, Daniels. It's about the lives you've ruined, the families you've torn apart. We won't let you get away with this." Daniels looked around, desperation evident in his eyes. "You have no proof. This is all a setup. We'll see how the courts handle you." At that moment, the sound of sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder as more police units arrived. The balance of power began to shift as law enforcement presence increased, responding to calls from concerned citizens who had been alerted by Rachel's media coverage. As Daniels and Henry realized they were being outnumbered and exposed, a palpable panic set in. "This isn't over, Ellis," he shouted, before turning and sprinting towards his sedan. As Daniels disappeared into the darkness, the backup arrived, officers quickly taking control of the situation. Marcus, bruised but unbowed, stood tall despite the pain. Ava and Rachel moved to his side, ensuring his safety as the remaining antagonistic figures were apprehended. Breathing heavily, Marcus looked around at the scene. The community center, now a battleground of justice and resilience. Ava and Rachel exchanged a look of mutual understanding and determination. "We did it," Ava said, her voice filled with both exhaustion and pride. "But we have more work to do." Rachel nodded, her eyes steely with determination. "This is just the beginning. We need to continue exposing the corruption within the system. This is just one example of how power can be abused." As the chaos settled, Marcus felt a profound sense of purpose. The confrontation had tested his limits, both physically and emotionally, but his resolve had only strengthened, his commitment to justice unshaken. He knew that systemic corruption and prejudice were deeply entrenched, but with allies like Ava and Rachel and the support of the community, he was ready to continue the fight. But just as the immediate danger had passed, a new threat emerged, an unexpected twist that would push Marcus to his breaking point and force him to confront the full extent of the corruption that plagued Riverside City. As Marcus and his allies began to process the events of the night, his phone buzzed with another message. It was a text from an unknown number. "You think you've won, Ellis? We're always watching." A chill ran down Marcus's spine as he read the message, the implications clear and ominous. The battle was far from over, and the forces arrayed against him were more determined and dangerous than ever. The weight of the message hung heavy in the air, a stark reminder that the fight for justice and equity in Riverside City was far from complete. He glanced at Ava and Rachel, their faces reflecting the same mixture of determination and concern. "We're not done yet," he said firmly, his eyes meeting theirs. "This is just the beginning." As the night deepened, Marcus knew that the road ahead would be fraught with challenges, but his commitment to his community and the truth would guide him through the darkness. The pivotal moment had arrived, setting the stage for the ultimate showdown that would determine the future of Riverside City.